everyone, and welcome back to Rise with Sarah and Connor. I am your host, Sarah. Today, I have the phenomenal Corrine Forsyth joining me from Queensland, from Ray White, Beanley. Thank you, Corrine, so much. I'm super excited to have you on this week's episode.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
It's been a journey. We first connected through both being in the Ray White group feels like many years ago. And yeah, 5? Yeah. And I have just loved watching your journey. But before we get into that, for those that do not know you, Corrine, who is Corrine?
Well, obviously, my name is Corrine. I'm a mum of one. Remy, she's now 5 years old. Personality of 3 children in one, so she keeps me on her toes. Very much a mini me, so, calmer. And then I have 3 pugs, which are like extra additional children because I think they're human as well, and a partner. So don't really have too many hobbies because I do work a lot. So I probably say like real estate is a hobby. My partner works in the building industry, so very, I guess, property related as well. So that's pretty much, I'm a very simple person, love to work, hang out with my friends, and mum life takes up majority of my time.
Yeah, I love it. Mum life. So 4 kids. I love that you and your partner have, things to talk about, relatability, him being in the building industry, you in real estate, because there's so much crossover. And what is phenomenal is that, you are a mum and you are building up such a successful career, and you are currently doing sales, but previously BDM. So would love to explore and to talk about with the listeners what your journey was like as a business development manager, and actually what led you into the BDM role.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into a BDM role. I'd been working in property management for some time. So I actually started real estate in 2008. So I progressed from being receptionist to administration assistant, property manager. So I had quite a large portfolio. By the time I was 18, I think I managed about 200 and something portfolio. Didn't quite know what I was doing, but I'm pretty self-driven. I do, seek a lot of training and guidance and things like that. Obviously met a few industry trainers such as Stacey Holt, and a few people that kind of guided me throughout my career. So thank you, Stacey. So I did property management for a little while. I was at the same agency for about 7 years during that time. It was a Harcourt's office, and really liked the idea of the BDM role, but BDMs weren't really a thing back then. So I believe, I think it was 2013 or 2014, I stepped into a BDM role, but there wasn't really too much guidance of what that actually looked like. So there was a few BDMs out there that were doing, quite good numbers. I had a friend that worked at Harcourt's North Lakes. Her name's Kate. And she was really, I guess, good with having guidance. She was quite high performing. And then just reaching out to a few other people that were doing quite well in the industry to figure out what the hell I needed to do. So progressed over there. I had some really good business owners at that time as well. So that was quite good. And I spent a lot of time with the salespeople. So I went to all the sales meetings. I went to all the stock run, spent quite a lot of time with them. So did pick up a few things that they were doing. And then obviously started to get a few BDM trainers as well. So I moved from that agency in 2016 to an LJ Hooker office, and then ended up doing like a hybrid leasing BDM role, where I think I learned a lot because I was really out of my comfort zone. I was at a new employer. So I think that really did kind of strengthen my skills, especially in that market, because it was a very high vacancy market. So properties were taking up to 3 to 4 months to lease.
Wow.
Times. And there was usually in the area that we worked, which was an estate, in particular a new build estate, and there was probably 120 properties available at any time, and there was really nothing unique about the properties, because they were a standard investment off the plan build. So learned a lot during that time. Then I think I did that until 2018, and then I got pregnant with my daughter. Had a little bit of time off work. I only ended up having about 3 months off because I got really jittery didn't know what to do with myself. So an ex-colleague of mine rang me and said, hey, I've bought a business and I don't have a rent roll. Will you come and start the rent roll for me? And I was like, I have a 3-month-old baby, but sure, why not?
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up here. So ended up at Ray White Bean Lee. We had 0 properties when we first opened. We didn't have any software programs or anything like that. So we kind of had to sit down, make a plan, design how we wanted the department to look, and kind of build up from scratch from there and go from there. So I did that for a few years until I did transition into sales. But that ended up being a bit of a hybrid role. It was more business development, build the business, put on property managers under me, but then I managed the property managers as well.
Yeah. Amazing. What a incredible journey, Corinne. And there's so much I want to unpack in what you just said, like so much, because people have probably been like, cool. So one thing that we talk about is, I suppose, numbers as a BDM. And you know, what I suppose is classified as being a high performing BDM. So in your opinion, now that you're not a BDM, you're in sales, in your opinion, do you think numbers truly matter just in general, or do you think it's very dependent on the size of the business?
That's actually a really great question. I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not. However, I don't always think that focusing on bringing in really big numbers is always healthy. Only purely for the bases, there's so many factors in it. So for me, for instance, when we were building the rent roll, I was also managing a rental department, as well as dealing with new business, as well as making sure that the sales team are looked after with all of their leads. It was more about quality of leads than it was quantity, because a lot of trainers out there are like, you need to get 30 a month, you need to get 15 a month. But a BDM can go out there and sign up any property under the sun at any fee, really, and then put it into the property management department, and the property managers want to pull their hair out. So not all business is good business, right?
Yeah.
But also at the same time, it depends on where those leads, one, where the leads are coming from, but two, like also looking after your current clients. I feel like some businesses focus so much on growth, but they don't look at actually servicing the current clients that they do have. So I think that side does get neglected at some point as well. So I was more about the quality of it, making sure that everyone's being looked after. We're not just purely on the numbers, and also just making sure that they're not falling out the bottom either. So you can top a rent roll up as much as you want, but if they're pouring out a hole in the bottom, then what's the point of even having a BDM if you can't nurture your current clients?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And I'm very similar mentality, you know, not just being a mentor and a trainer now, but as a BDM, like I learned some harsh lessons too on that, because it was a lot number driven and competitive in terms of, oh, who's got the most listings this month. And I think that's very much a sales mentality. But we look at now, and I think it is changing, of, you know, how much that property is producing in terms of revenue per year. The quality of the landlords is really important, because we want to make sure that essentially they're an extension of the brand. It's true. We want them to be what I call as brand champions and really happy with us, because, well, we're meeting their expectations. They know the expectations as well from the PMs and the businesses, and everyone's happy and wins. So I definitely think things are changing. And I always like, you know, yes, sometimes it's good to have some healthy competition, but what are we competing against? Just because someone's done 100 versus someone's that's done 10, there's so many different factors in that for a BDM. So I love what you just said. And then what about high performing? So if we look at, and taking numbers aside, like we're not going to focus on numbers because we're both like, doesn't matter about the numbers, it's the quality. Obviously, you know, your BDMs need to hit KPIs, but what do you think makes a high performing business development manager? What are the skill sets?
Looking back now, I know hindsight is a great thing, right?
Yeah.
Looking back now, I purely think that having a look at where the leads are coming from. So sometimes I feel like, depending on what fishing rod you have in what bucket, is if you work in an office that has a really, really large sales team, for instance, a lot of leads are going to get fed through to the BDM. So I heard a podcast somewhere and I can't remember where I heard it, but they had like a supermarket analogy. It's like, are you just checking them in
Mm,
instead of going out and sourcing the business? So I think it really comes down to two factors: is where are the leads coming from? Because depending on what area you work in and how big your business is, and what relationships your business do have, and if you're new, sometimes you will get BDMs that they come in, they're pretty much just checking them out and putting them into there's no real, I guess, like hunting mentality.
mhm,
Um, so I definitely think it comes down to skill set, and that probably should be looked at a little bit more. So like, is that BDM going out and actually going and marketing and trying to find ways to get new business, or are they just taking every phone call that comes into the office and every referral, and they're not really hunting for the business? So
mm.
sometimes you think someone's high performing, but really it's like, if that person stepped out of the business and someone stepped in, the numbers would still be the same.
Yeah, I love that. And I think similarly in terms of my view of a business development manager is someone that drives growth for the business. We're talking about, and what essentially you're referring to, Corrine, is someone who's just closing, right? So leads are coming in and they're just closing, which then brings me back to, well, essentially they're just a sales agent, right? Because they're just closing sales, they're getting deals done. And that's it. Whereas I think being a high performing business development manager, there's multiple different facets, but someone who, yes, will nurture and convert those leads that are coming in from the office, but also are the face of the property management division. They're out there talking to people, meeting people, finding new opportunities, coming up with business plans and strategies to grow the rental department. Do you think same then with that?
I feel like, and some people that do those types of roles as well, it's obviously going to start off slow, right? Because you have to nurture people to a certain capacity. And sometimes you'll have to have 7 points of contact before anyone will even give you the time of day. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. It's always about how many someone does in a month. It's like, oh, well, they do 30, 40, 50 in a month. They're extremely high performing. And that's quite, I guess, the people that work really hard and go out there and they do the marketing, they do the YouTube videos, they actually spend time with the salespeople to nurture that relationship. I think because they're like, if you're only doing say 12 to 15 or sometimes 20 a month, they get overlooked a little bit.
For sure.
Um, yeah, so sometimes I just think that the role is purely based on numbers, 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 when really it should be looked at overall. And it's the same with sales, right? Everyone's like, well, how much GCI do you do? And then
Yeah.
everyone's bases things on how much GCI you produce, not what service you've provided your clients.
Yeah, I love that. I remember actually some of the questions that were asked in the Ray White submission for when I was a BDM. And we actually had to give examples of our involvement in the community or how we went above and beyond to help a client or particular client. So then it wasn't just based on the numbers or the revenue producing. It then was about the quality and the service. And I think that's what we should be talking about more. Like okay, so you're a high performer, you're doing great numbers, but where are you getting these people from? Like,
Yeah,
what are you doing to get these people? Great. You've got a sales team. Awesome. You're a great closer. I want to know how you're nurturing these clients. Yeah. How you're attracting them in. And that's, to me, what I perceive as being a high performer, someone who's a go-getter and actively out there working their communities, delivering great customer service. Like, show me your reviews, show me your case studies. Yeah. Like, that's what I think the industry needs to be more about. And I think it's going that way, but more and more, I think it needs to come from the top too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Completely agree. And because like a lot of BDMs too, there's so many different tiers of what they do. You've got someone that just purely focuses on signing new business, and then you have senior property managers that still have to manage a portfolio, but they're still putting new business into the portfolio, or you have someone that does leasing and new business on top of that as well.
Mhm.
So I just think that there's so many different levels of which you can do the job, but everyone just focuses on the numbers.
For sure. Now, one thing that comes up a lot with BDMs is mindset. So, and I have shared my journey around mindset. And, sometimes I used to work 12, 40 nowadays. And looking back, I was like, why did you do that? Wasn't necessary. But what did you do as a BDM that helped you with your mindset and ensuring that essentially you don't get burned out? Or did you get burned out?
I have been burnt out on two probably occasions over the last 15 years that are quite memorable, and I was quite sick. And I look back now and I realize how I've gotten there, and I do try and prevent that from happening again. I think one thing I really had to learn was I know you have to be available to people all the time, but I think you need to get better at setting boundaries with people.
Mhm.
So that was one thing I worked really hard on. So when I first came back to work after having my daughter, I didn't work 5 days a week. I worked 4 days a week and still had to run a department and still had to deal with the new business. Yes, on occasion, like on the day that I didn't work, I'd still have to do, trust accounting and all the things that no one really wants to do, but those things need to be done daily. But people understood if I was not available at a certain time. And if people want to do business with you, they realize that you're human. So if something really needed to be done, fine, I could get it covered if I physically couldn't be there. But a lot of the time, I could do my meetings on the days that I was at work. And don't get me wrong, I worked a lot after hours. Look, I don't think you shouldn't have done that. But if you set boundaries with people, you'd be surprised at, like, we're human, they're human. It just really adds that fact. Or, oh, look, I apologize, I can't do that day. I've got to pick my children up. Here's an alternative. And people are actually okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I've even been now educating clients that have something in place that even if you can't call that person straight away, that they're still hearing from you. And majority of offices now do have remote assistance, right? Which your remote assistance can be entering leads into your CRM. You can have a video that you've pre-recorded as an intro. You could have something that goes out to them saying, like, thank you for your inquiry. You're important to us. However, at the moment we are with other clients. We'll endeavor to get back to you within 24 hours or something to that effect, so that you're not dismissing them. You're not ignoring them, you're acknowledging them. And I think it's a great touch point that you've already got a video that you could send out to a client before they even talk to you, so that then they're not then waiting, oh, well, we just haven't heard from Corrine, she must not care about me. But you already from the start, you're like, yes, you're important, but we're servicing other clients at the moment too. And I think it's a really good idea. What do you think about that idea?
As well. And like, it depends on what system you use, but like if a lead comes into the office and your office uses IRA BDM, for an example, and your receptionist puts the lead through the system, you can set out an automatic thing to go out to that lead anyway. That gives the BDM a little bit of time, if they are in a listing appointment, to then be able to call them once they're done with that. I think as well, like, I really love the automated text on my phone. So, because I get a lot of phone calls, and look, a lot of it is obviously buyer inquiry at any given time. But if I get a phone call come through, and even on my Apple Watch, and I'm with a client, I just automatic text back to everyone. I'm sorry, I'm not available at the moment. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Please text me with your property inquiry. And then that way I can go back through my text messages and call back from my text messages, and also see if I've got any history of those people. So I actually know what I'm like, if I've spoken to them before, I can look at that thread through too. So I wish I had done that sooner. I think property managers probably need to utilize that a little bit better, because you can't always make yourself available to someone. Like there's only so many times you can sit here and try and write an email with answering every single phone call that comes out. So having that automation to let people know, and it's the same with your emails too.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm really quick on the email now, obviously, because I don't get a high volume like I did in property management. But, when we had Property Me, like the auto responses to say, look, thank you, we've received your email. It's outside of hours, or if it's inside hours, it's a different message. But people know that it's been received, and they will action it. So if you set boundaries and timelines of things, you obviously overpromise, the saying, over
promise, undeliver.
Yeah. So I just think it's all about just realizing you can do that, and not trying to be everything to everyone all the time.
Yeah, great tips there. So Corrine, what was the structure of the BDM role when you were a BDM?
Yeah, so I've had a few different structures. The last role that I did, obviously working in management as well, I did all the listing, the signing up, the nurturing, putting into a portfolio, choosing the property manager that they would be dealing with, introducing them, listing the property for rent, pricing the property, writing the description. At that time, obviously, because we started from scratch, we didn't have, like thousands of managements, and each portfolio liked to deal with that property managers like to deal with the leasing of their property. So I would hand it over to them, and then I'd monitor it as well. So I do, like first month in, give them a call, just make sure everything's going okay.
Yeah. And then touch points afterwards.
Well, we did. So I used to obviously do a lot of like emails out with legislation changes and things like that. So I took care of like big bulk communication with owners throughout the entire portfolio, obviously being head of department. And I would keep on top of things. If things weren't going quite right, then I would, I can't help myself. I used to get involved a lot. So that's also a downfall of getting too emotionally involved in a job and a role is, sometimes you got to learn when to step out. But yeah.
I think as well, as a BDM, especially the ones that are going out and hunting, not just farming and nurturing, is you work really hard to onboard that client. So naturally you want to, it's like your baby, right? Like you want to see them flourish and you want to make sure everything is going well. And earlier you spoke about retention. And one thing that I feel needs to happen more is in terms of database management, like I feel BDM should be 100% calling their current clients, even though the property has gone to a property manager, because there's different services essentially that a BDM can offer in terms of a value add. Not all property managers are at the same skill level when it comes to a BDM. And also, if something does happen, then who else can that landlord speak to? If you haven't continued to nurture that relationship, well, it can take maybe 1-2 times that they've had a falling out with that property manager. No one else is contacting them. They're gone. Yeah. So you're better off hearing from, 2 people, even like directors. Like I think directors and business owners should be getting on the phones or, sending out regular things as well from them. It's their business, so that the relationship is not just with the PM or BDM, it's with the actual business owners, right? That's retention now. We can't just rely on property manager to do all things. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree as well. And I think as well, having the relationship with the owners, like I did, if something went wrong, they would also call me and be like, hey, this has gone wrong, but they always knew that I would fix it straight away. So it's like, look, unfortunately, I'm sorry that that's happened. I'll ensure that, and then I'd update them and I'd ensure that it was fixed. So I had a and look, I still have relationships with some of these owners as well, which I think has been quite beneficial. Obviously, moving into a sales role is that, I've got one owner and he just rings me and goes, I just ring you because I know you get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah.
People make mistakes, so just owning it and then making sure that you're fixing it, but you're also updating them to ensure that it is fixed as well. Look, I think it also helps having that relationship. So if the owner does want to sell, you don't find out from an external salesperson that the owner's selling that property. They come to you first as well, because you want to make sure that if it does get sold, it goes to a sales team member, and then you keep on top of that sales member to make sure that when it does sell, that it comes back into the portfolio as well. 100%. So I just, there's retention. It's one thing that I think definitely gets overlooked, because everyone's so focused on growth, and owners also have other properties too. They could have bought something between an 18-month period of when you first brought them on.
Yeah.
I think a lot of BDMs, they probably don't look at that as much, is that some owners do have 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 properties with different property managers. And a lot of the time that is actually within half an hour's drive of each property. So one property manager could look after that.
After it, yeah. The other thing I love and encourage is, when you're really getting to know your owners at the start and you know what their goals and motivations are for their investment property, well, proactively, like we're talking about, that proactiveness of a skill set of a high performing BDM, if they have said that essentially they want to build their portfolio, well, in 12 months' time, proactively organize a valuation on their home so they know how much it's gone up in growth, then they'll be able to pull equity from their current mortgage, buy another property. Like that is high level BDM stuff and conversations just there.
I think as well, a lot of BDMs probably need to understand the purchasing journey. So, and it took me probably a while to understand that until I bought my own property to realize what actually is involved in purchasing a property, because that also helps you know what's the right time to step in as well when someone is purchasing, or if they're going through the build process, like what services you can offer them. But also understanding the equity and having a mortgage broker that they can actually speak to as well. Even like looking back, if I was to step back into that role as well, like conveyancers are probably also a good relationship to have too, because a lot of the time they're involved in the selling process at contract stage, and some people haven't made a decision by then.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember going out and even talking to mortgage brokers, and the first thing I would ask them is like, do you have an existing relationship with the property manager? And I was blown away at how many said no. I was like, so what additional services are you offering to your clients so that you're helping them not just with their mortgage, but on their journey? So, and this is why it's so important, like you said, to work with other people, which is what I call your power team, so that you're getting educated from these experts that are talking to your investors anyway. Then you're upskilling, up leveling yourself, as well as you're helping other businesses and other people up leveling and upskilling their businesses and themselves too. Like it's a win-win in terms of partnerships.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely think that those types of relationships are probably overlooked a little bit. Everyone's kind of, I guess, looking at what they can send out, what they can sign up from, what comes in like inbound into the office, instead of looking at like the overall what hands can we have in what pie. So if leads die off on this side, then what can we do with this? It's same with like investor inquiry that comes through from realestate.com. I feel like BDMs have so much data, but none of them are like, a lot of people that I've met aren't really digging into that data.
Yeah.
So, and look, don't get me wrong, you can spend a few hours on the phone ringing these investors, and they may buy in a different suburb that probably you don't service, but you could refer that on to someone else.
100%. And that's what we used to do. Like, and that's why I think it's so important. Like, Corrine, we're in different states, right? But we used to speak as BDMs in different states because there's opportunities, or we would have discussions. And I actually was looking through our messages, and there was someone that you were talking to that I referred. I don't know if you ended up getting the business with that particular lady because she was a bit of hard work, but that's the opportunities that are out there if we, talked through the different states. And there's a lot of different activities that are happening, and data, like people buy data now, right? Like I'm an advocate for ID. For me, I think it's absolutely great that we've got the accessibility to extend our data. Like there's so many different avenues, but a lot of agencies, and we're talking about, essentially sales agencies as well, they've got years and years of purchaser details. And we know that I think is it every 6-7 years people tend to.
I actually think it's a bit shorter now, I reckon.
Now?
Yeah, especially obviously with times changing and things like that I do sell like a lot of investment type stock. And at one point, obviously with the rise of interest rates, we had a few owners that had multiple investments but they were working 2 jobs to try and keep that afloat. So they've had to kind of offload one from their portfolio. But there's probably thousands. Like if BDMs actually really looked, there's probably thousands of investor leads in the back end of realestate.com. Some inquiries from their sales properties.
Absolutely. So then, Corrine, were you a advocate of doing phone calls? Were you comfortable doing the calls and prospecting?
I don't like phone calling. I don't like it, but you do have to do it. And sometimes I do have to mentally work myself up to do it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I feel like I'm more confident on the phone in property management than I am in sales, because I did property management for 15 years. And I think that's probably why I find it so easy dealing with investors.
Yeah.
So used to it. But I did call investor inquiry. And I did list property out of it. And I think it's just such an underutilized tool. I guess that's obviously based off like previous training, investor support service and whatever it might be. You don't have to go and do 1,000 inspections for someone to be able to provide them information of what areas to buy in.
Yeah.
So you can literally just have a document with maybe suburbs that you service where it has a high rental yield, or me personally, I would buy an investment property, and then just educate those people, because people don't know the area. They don't know the hidden pockets. They don't know the smaller suburbs. So just having a little bit of information on hand, giving them a call, see if they're still looking. If they've purchased something, do they have a property manager? If they haven't purchased something, what areas are they looking in? And then keeping them in IRE, BDM, and doing like your campaign follow-ups as well.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes we can view things more complicated than it needs to be. Like it can be as easy as we make it. Like you just said, it's a document. The statistics, we have the availability. Like I've even seen in some investor groups, someone asked about, well, with wanting to increase the rent, but they can't see the data on what properties have been leased. They can only see what's online. So they're not being able to give an accurate indication to their renters on a rental price. So I'm like, these are the advantages or points of value that we can add. And I remember, and I don't know if you're the same, Corrine, but when I used to receive leads from someone who had purchased an investment property already, they hadn't even received a rental appraisal before, right? Whether it was from the sales agent or from like a letter, right? But they hadn't, and they've spent this money, and then they're coming to someone for professional service to then get it. I'm like, this is where there's still heaps of opportunity out there. And we're both talking like going back to a BDM, what would we be doing? That's the message that I would be sending, is like, hey, I can save you money by ensuring that you're making a smart decision, right? Because not everyone goes to a buyer agent or a buyer advisor, right? Yeah. Some people can't afford between 15, 20 grand, right, to buy a house, but they will pay you to provide your services. You're not going to charge 15 grand, but you know what renters are looking for. You can have a look at what's going on for rental yield and capital growth. And anyone listening, if you do not know what those terminologies mean or stand for, please reach out and I will help you through that, because it's important. But we have that stats, and it can be easy to just put a report in place and have something readily available to investors that you can send to them for free, which some other BDMs might not be doing. You're already at an advantage then.
Yeah, exactly. And realestate.com, it has quite a good tool. So you can enter in a suburb, for instance, and it will give you pretty much all of the statistics, like what's the average rental yield, how many properties have been leased in the last 12 months, what's the median rent price. So like if you Google it, you can literally star them on your homepage. So when you're talking to people, you can flick people links. You can send them a yield calculator. Like that, there are things that you can have there ready as SMS templates to send through to people, so that you're not, I guess, necessarily, because I guess at some point when people start asking you like accounting questions and things like that, I'm always like, oh, look, you just enter this information into a link, because I'm not going to.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't specialize in that. But if you have all those links available, especially to like government websites and things like that, you can just have them there ready to send off.
For sure. Even just the ABS website, like everyone's got availability to that. You don't have to have a password. And a lot of people don't even know, which a lot of buyer advisors and buyer agents use that. Like, and it blows my mind that something so small that essentially you can provide of value to a potential investor that saves them time, saves them money, and you look like the absolute go-to. And all you've done is actually recommended them to go to this place and have a look at the demographics in an area. It can be that simple.
Yeah. And look, we do these things every day, right? So things that we think that people know, they have no idea. People don't know what they don't know. And this is probably when I'm doing open homes, like in the role that I'm doing now, is I always ask people, like, is this your first investment purchase? Because then you understand, are they a seasoned investor or are they a fresh investor? Because it can be really overwhelming if you've never invested before, especially like, you're going through the property, you don't know the area, you don't know if what the current rent the tenants are paying is market value. Like, it's very overwhelming. And a lot of the time people are looking at like 10, 15 properties in a row on a weekend, and it all just mushes together. So I definitely think just having that information there on hand,
Yep.
even if you just save like templates in your notes on your phone, you don't have to sit there and type everything out every time.
Yeah, 100%. Agree. And I love that you mentioned overwhelming, Corinne, and especially, you know, I know that new reforms Queensland now, but, you know, Victoria, we were hit with these like 4 years ago. We've got announcements, potentially more coming to us. And this is when there's a lot of stuff investors need to know. Again, making it easy for them, have some FAQ sheets so that it's just some basic information without overwhelming them even more, but then them wanting to hear more information and being educated by you. Because essentially, if property management was easy and no problems like existed, or we had all of our renters paying their rent on time, no damages, properties leased after one open for inspection, landlords probably wouldn't need us. But the reality is they do, because they can get fined. There's huge fines out there now. They aren't expected to know all of the legislation. So I think that's a reminder for BDMs is the more you upskill and educate yourself, the more valuable you are in your marketplace.
I completely agree. And I also think if you don't have a background in property management and you're just going straight into BDM fresh, it's really good to quite understand what goes on in the daily life of a property manager as well. So you setting expectations that are then going to be carried on when you do hand them over to the property manager, because I've seen too many times where the BDM has set the standard up here,
Yeah.
but never kind of, or at least in the last like 5-6 years, done the job. And then the property manager's kind of at here. And then that's when you see them falling out the bottom, is because the expectation isn't set correctly at the start.
Absolutely. Some great points there. So, Corinne, what motivated you to transition to sales?
I'd wanted to do it for a while. But having like such a young child probably wasn't ideal. Obviously, you know, you're probably working, I'd say, I'll see, I worked a lot in property management, but I could do a lot of it at home, whereas like in this role, I'm probably on the road a little bit more. So being gone like 6 full days a week and then just having that one day to try and cram everything in does make it a little bit hard. To be honest with you, I was tired. Like I had done it for so long, a lot of hurdles, and constantly out there working my butt off. Love our business owner, but you're working your butt off, and I'm just like, oh, maybe if I put this into doing something for myself, I could make the money for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was tired. And also being a head of department, staff was hard. Competent. I like things done to a particular standard, and sometimes finding high performing property managers was also quite difficult. So I was constantly on the tools as well, which then took me away from doing BDM, which is what I liked, because that's why I got out of property management to begin with. And I thought, you know what, instead of completely leaving the industry altogether, because let's be honest, a lot of people get to that point and then like, I'm going to leave the industry. I thought I'll go over here, and then if this doesn't work, then I'll see what I'll do.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love is your honesty, Corinne. And I know like you've got a mentor at the moment. I think you're working with, is it Sherry that you're working with? Yeah. And I love that consistently you have engaged with coaches or mentors or trainers, or gone to events to assist you with where you are at now, but also where you want to get to. Yeah. So I think hats off to you for going in, giving it a go, and also acknowledging like, hey, I'm not enjoying this anymore, but I want to make, you know, a fulfilling career for myself, and I'm sure for your family too. And you've gone all in and giving it a really good crack. Yeah. And that's what I admire about you. You're like, if I'm doing this, and we're going all in and we're doing it.
Yeah. And look, I do think I did have a slight advantage. Obviously, I'd been in the industry for a really long time. I'd made relationships with people. So I have had, I guess, the benefit of having said relationships. So if people want to buy more property, they will call me. because I didn't just disappear, obviously, from the landlords. I said, hey, look, this is what this is what I'm doing. I'm not leaving the business, because I thought it was really important to let them know that I'm not stepping out, because I'd been not consistent throughout the 4 years of growing the department. So I think overall I've sold maybe like 6 or 7 of my past clients in the last year and a half. So I've only been in sales for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Sorry. And even during that transition, I still was heavily involved in the transition in there. So it was kind of like my time was split a little bit, but I'm very grateful for the hard work has paid off in
Great.
that capacity as well.
Yeah, well done. And I look forward to continuing to see your journey and what's ahead for you. And lastly, Corrine, I would love to know, any advice for the last bits of advice for any BDMs listening who, perhaps are feeling a bit stuck at the moment or burnt out or just unsure. What would be like a message for them listening?
I think stick it out. I didn't get the hang of what I was doing until I was probably 4 years into the job. We all have no idea what we're doing. Every area works different. So you need to find what works for you. Some people get business from cold calling 5 hours a day. Other people get business from going out and making relationships. You just need to find out what works for you, because if you're constantly doing something you don't like every day, you're not going to stick with it, and it's not going to be longevity in the role.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Corrine, thank you so much for joining me. There's so much that I'm sure everyone will take away, and please give her a follow. I will pop Corrine's details below. Corrine's always up for a chat, which is absolutely what I love, and continuing to follow her journey as well. But I just want to say thank you for your contribution to everyone listening and cheering you on as always.
Sarah.
Pleasure. All right, everyone. That is us for the next episode. Have a lovely, lovely day. And as always, keep rising.